My name is Margaret Cole. I'm 63, a nurse, and according to Knox County, I'm dead. I'm not. 3 papers tried to erase me: a forged DNR, a diagnosis from a doctor who never met me, and a guardianship petition filed for my own good. They called it safety. I call it control. With a hurricane less than 48 hours away, my sister wanted me boxed away at Seabird Point before the shelters opened, so the house could list, the policy could pay, and I could quietly disappear. But I had other plans. A $20 recorder hidden in my medical list alarm, a 17-year-old genius who can make a camera tell the truth, and a small Maine town that still believes in writing things down when it matters. Tonight, you'll hear what they said when they thought no one was listening. You'll see how a retirement lobby full of donors turned into a courtroom preview. If someone offers to carry your life for you, first check what they've already dropped. Stay with me. Before this storm is over, you'll know how we stopped a perfect con during Hurricane Week and why my name is still mine. 3 days ago, my sister walked into the Knox County probate courtroom, smoothed the skirt of her navy suit, and signed the papers that said I was dead, while I was still breathing on the other side of town. She set the pen down like it was any ordinary signature. Cable bill, package receipt, a charity pledge at a gala, and smiled at the clerk the way she used to smile at lifeguards when we were teenagers. A smooth, easy practice smile, the kind you deploy when you've already decided how the day will go. I know this, not because I was in that courtroom, but because Bryce, a man I once believed was too careful to ever marry my sister, left his briefcase half-zipped in my kitchen, and I found the rehearsal. A typed script of what Evelyn would say and what she wouldn't say, and where she should pause to look overcome. Meanwhile, I was washing bandages in my clinic's little utility sink, the way I've done for decades, listening to the storm sirens test the town's patience again. It was Hurricane Week on the Maine coast, the satellites spitting out colored swirls, the meteorologists reminding us about plywood and batteries and canned beans. My name is Margaret Cole. I'm 63 years old. When a person tells you, "We thought you'd be more comfortable at Seabird Point," what they might mean, if the person is my sister, is, "It will be easier to bury you when you're already boxed." I'm a nurse. That's the short answer to 100 questions. It's the answer to why I carry a little pen light in my pocket, even when I'm not on shift. Why the freezer always has ice packs no one else understands. Why there's a jar on the counter with dollars for people who don't have copays. It is also the answer to why I noticed my own name in the decedent field on a pre-filed insurance claim form that fell out of Bryce's briefcase, along with the courtroom script. Nurses notice. We learn to stand in a room where pain is a given and say in a voice that does not tremble, "Tell me exactly what you're feeling." It is a foggy skill. It lets you see through other fogs. Port Harridan is one of those coastal towns postcards try to get right, but never do. The gulls shriek at 5 a.m. whether there's fish or not. The harbor smells like salt and diesel and sometimes like rain, even when the sky is a scrubbed blue promise. I grew up here with my sister, Evelyn, and with our older brother, Jack, until Jack left for the Navy and never came back except in stories. Our mother worked the diner on Mill Street. Our father set traps and swore at storms that mocked him. We learned the map of the town by foot. School to church to pier to cemetery and back. And by the time I turned 18, I could wrap a sprained ankle with hardware store tape and coax a furious toddler out from under a table with nothing but a raisin box and a wink. I met my husband in that diner. Tom Cole had eyes you only understood if you'd ever watched a man study the tide chart like scripture. Lobstermen try not to make promises because the ocean likes to break them. Tom made exactly 2. He'd keep his boat better than his truck, and he'd keep me better than both. He was 49 when a rogue wave corrected the second promise, and the morning after the Coast Guard told me what I already knew, I held his mug in both my hands to warm them. The mug said, "Coffee is for closers," because that had made him laugh once, and now it made me angry for a week. When anger ebbed, work remained. There's a tenderness in work that grief can't drown. Tom and I never had children. It wasn't a choice, and it wasn't not a choice. It was like the weather. There, then gone. Then a day you don't talk about because you're tired of talking about something you can't fix. People tried to compensate for us. The townspeople sent pies. The church sent casseroles. My patients sent notes that began, "I know you don't like a fuss," but went on to make one. And my sister began to visit in a way she had never learned when we were girls. Evelyn has always been a person who knows where cameras are. She can stand anywhere, and a lens will find her best angle as if it owes her something. She worked in real estate and then fundraising, and then she married Bryce, a lawyer from Portland who smiled with the corners of his mouth, not his eyes. Together, they lifted money off rich summer people for hospital wings and scholarships and the Seabird Point retirement community, which sits on a hill over Seal Cove like a gleaming promise that nothing ends if your lobby has enough glass. The year after Tom died, they started their visits with portfolios, donor stewardship, they called it. If I sold my cottage, I could move into a care continuum that would hold me gently from independent living all the way to memory care, a phrase that sounds sweet until you taste it. We'd be close, Ev would say, and we could keep an eye on you. She would let the word "we" float like there was safety in pronouns. You shouldn't be alone during storm season, Bryce would add, opening his hands to show me how transparent he was. People don't die because of storms, I said once. They die because someone else decides what's best for them. Don't be dramatic, Meg, Ev said, and the name fell off her tongue wrong, the way it always does when she wants me to feel small. No one has called me Meg since Tom, and she knows it. There's a thing that happens in small towns when people age. We stop seeing the people who taught us to mow yards and stitch buttons and take out the trash. We fold them into categories: sweet, stubborn, fragile. We label. We speak over. We tell them things are for their own good. We tuck them away because it's easier than listening. When the first letter came, I thought it was a mistake. It was from a life insurance company I didn't have a policy with, thanking me for updating my beneficiary. I tossed it. The second letter came with my middle name spelled wrong and a reference number I didn't recognize. The third was a gentle reminder that my premium was due and that my doctor's report had been received. The fourth was the one that made me sit down with the kind of careful that makes your bones feel glassy. It was a poppy copy of a paper titled "Do Not Resuscitate, Patient's Original," with my signature at the bottom and a witness line bearing my sister's neat looped cursive, Evelyn Ward. People forget this about nurses. We know what our signatures look like after 14 hours and after a glass of wine and after a hard day and a good day and after a patient says thank you in a way that rearranges your heart. We also know when someone has practiced our names on scrap paper and then done their best. My forged name on the DNR looked like a math teacher practicing cursive. Clean, patient, too careful. I used to sign my name like a person late for a train. A week later, a neurologist I had never met issued a report stating that I exhibited marked cognitive decline consistent with early-stage dementia, and that I would be safer in supervised care. I read the report twice and then laughed, and then I did not laugh at all. And then I moved through my house, touching the edges of my life the way a person checks windows before a storm. I touched the oil painting of the cove Tom and I couldn't afford but bought anyway because it made him breathe like a boy again. I touched the nick in the doorframe where my niece Maya had measured herself at 11 and 14 and then decided she didn't want to know anymore. I touched the small box at the back of the pantry where I keep a few dollars for people who can't say they need them. I called Dr. Klein, the neurologist. His receptionist told me I needed a referral, and I told her I had one, the letter he had written about me without ever seeing me. I could hear the receptionist swallow. She asked me to hold. Dr. Klein came on, his voice thin with caution. "Miss Cole, there must be a misunderstanding." I said, "Tell me exactly what you wrote." He said, "It's standard language. A family member requested an evaluation."
Which family member? I can't. Privacy laws. You wrote a diagnosis about my brain based on a conversation you had with a woman who smiles through her teeth. Miss Cole, there is a process for disputing findings. There will be a different process, I said, if I ever see your pen anywhere near my chart again. When I hung up, my hands shook. I went to the clinic and put them to work. Every person who walked into my soft, cluttered waiting room that day reminded me that those hands knew what to do. I changed a dressing on a fisherman's heel that looked like the ocean had tried to bite off a piece and failed. I listened to a widow tell me the same story she tells me every Tuesday, the one about how love proofreads your days, and suddenly you see the errors again when it's gone. I watched a teenager stare at the floor and say he was fine, while his hunched shoulders told me the world was heavier than whatever he'd done last week. When your body remembers what useful feels like, your fear doesn't get to sit at the table with the same authority. That night, Evelyn knocked with a pie she did not bake. She let herself in, the way she has always done with my house and my moods. "You look tired," she said, a kindness turned weapon by tune. "We brought dinner. Figured you probably forgot to eat." The "we" meant Bryce, who set down a bag and gave me that precise lawyer look that says he can see the future because he's already billed for it.
"I'm making tomato soup," I said. "I'll eat after you go." "Don't be prickly," she said, and put the pie in the fridge as if it were her kitchen to arrange. "It's storm season. We need a plan." "We always need a plan." "This time we have one," Bryce said, smiling like the corners of a photograph. "We're moving you to Seabird Point for a while, just for safety. We'll stage your house for sale, handle the financials, take the weight off your shoulders. No more climbing ladders to tape your windows. No more generator fumes. No more freedom," I said. "No more keys. No more mail. No more tax bills in my own name." "Don't be dramatic," Evelyn said again. And there it was, the thing she says when she means, "Stop seeing what I'm doing." She touched my arm, a sisterly stroke that might have comforted me once. Now it felt like someone measuring my pulse for timing. "Meg, we're worried about you." "You're worried about your fundraising thermometers," I said. "You're worried about donors who don't want to tour a facility with empty rooms." Evelyn's smile did that small, strange thing it does when she can't find the light and blames the sun. "You're not the only one who's tired. We carry a lot. If you come to Seabird, we'll be right there." She was right about one thing. I was tired. I had been tired since the first letter, and I was newly tired since the forged DNR, and I was the kind of tired that makes you want to hand your bones to someone else for a few hours and say, "Please hold these. I need to remember who they belong to." But I was not the kind of tired that signs away my name. When they left, I made a list. Lists are how nurses make fear behave. At the top, I wrote, "This is not about care." Under that, I wrote, "This is about control." Beneath that, in different ink, because I wanted it to stand up on the page, I wrote, Evelyn has always wanted the key no one gave her. The next morning, I opened the circuit panel and studied the labels like a woman learning a new hymn. I shut off the gas at the main, closed the tiny, sneaky valve people forget about, and then did what I've always done when something doesn't feel safe. I told someone who would believe me. Zoe Rivera is 17, has hair the color of an autumn riot, and knows more about electronics than the men who sell them to her. She cleans at the clinic in exchange for the safe that holds epinephrine and sample medications, and for my promise to teach her how to read vital signs like a second language. Her mother, Marta, mops at Seabird Point and says the rich ladies there forget that the floors are more honest than their smiles. Zoe is the sort of kid who asks, "Do you want help or do you want company?" and means it. I showed Zoe the forged DNR and the neurologist's letter and the decedent form. She read silently, her eyes like lit fuses. "What do you need me to build?" she asked. "Not a bomb," I said. "A truth." She said, "Same thing," she grinned, the way Tom used to when he could make a pun out of the tide. She set her phone down and began drawing a diagram on the back of a file folder. "Your wrist alarm has a double tap that nobody uses. We can turn it into a recorder. I'll route storage to a cloud account I set up for you under a fake contact. You double tap when you're scared. It runs 30 minutes. Again to stop. I can make a backup that routes to your neighbor's Nest camera. Belts and suspenders." I looked at her face and felt the particular relief of being seen by someone who hasn't yet learned to ignore her own good instincts. "You're gonna be a problem for people who deserve it," I said. "Hope so," she said. "You going to tell the police?" "I'm going to collect something that makes the police write things down fast." 2 days later, Evelyn returned with brochures and a look of concern upgraded to performance grade. Bryce spoke in sentences about guardianship and temporary fiduciary oversight, and I thought about the 100 small things a person can lose one at a time until other people are suddenly speaking in legal language you don't recognize. My bills were paid. My lights were on. My charting was up to date. I did not need a guardian. I needed a sister. "Let's go for a drive," I said, which startled them, because my house is my fort, and I do not leave it with anyone who calls it a burden. "You said you wanted to show me Seabird. Show me." The lobby was the kind of beautiful that lets you forget what it's for. Light that could make anyone look gold if they stood in it long enough, plants too glossy to be alive, a water feature that made even the anxious breathe deeper. The desk clerk smiled with the precise kindness of someone who would call you by name and then by room number without ever knowing your middle. The director of admissions arrived in less than a minute, as if she'd been waiting for us, which she had. Bryce gives a lot of money. Evelyn collects it. "I'm just touring," I said, and the director nodded in the way people nod when they are sure a tour will end with a signature. Marta was buffing the floor by the south corridor, and her eyes flicked up, met mine, and then flicked to Zoe's little camera button in the lobby ceiling, which is supposed to make donors feel safe and residents feel watched. I lifted my wrist and scratched like a woman with a small itch and double-tapped the alarm. Evelyn clasped her hands like a teacher about to begin a favorite unit. "Meg, look at this dining room. Imagine not cooking. Imagine a chef who knows your low sodium preferences." "I like soup," I said. "You can have all the soup you want," she said, cheerful even when I wasn't playing, "and you won't even have to do dishes."
We toured the Memory Care Wing, which the brochures depict with birds and flowers, and which looks, stripped of paint and soft music, like what it is, a corridor designed to contain people who once had keys and don't anymore. A woman with white hair and a floral sweater looked at me like she recognized me. "Have you seen my husband?" she asked. "He was supposed to be back by noon." "Not yet," I said. "I'll tell him you're waiting." "People always say that," she said. And something in her voice banged a soft hammer against my ribs. Evelyn leaned close. "She wandered off last week," she whispered. "They had to bring her back. She's safer here." "Safer than what?" I asked. "Safer than herself."
On the way out, Bryce paused by the donor wall, where names etched in glass performed the illusion that gratitude belongs to those with the money to require it. "Your late husband would be pleased if you made a gift in his honor," he said. "Perhaps a sweet." "My late husband would be pleased if people learned to read the weather in other people's faces," I said. "It's going to storm." He looked at the sky through the 3-story windows. "That's the point," he said. "You can stay here through the hurricane. They have generators." "So do we," I said. "Tom and I put it in the year before he died." "Those home generators fail," he said, and smiled. "It would help us if you were here." It was the first true thing either of them had said all morning. When we got back to my house, I made tea that I did not drink. Evelyn stood at the sink and rearranged the dish soap the way people do when they want to control a room. "We thought we'd host a little cocktail hour next week. You'll like it. There's a singing group coming up from Boston. And there's a donor who loved Tom's boat. You know, the photo of it at Blue Hour, who offered to sponsor a little plaque in his honor it would be a wonderful tribute." My sister does not stumble in her sentences unless she is lying or telling the truth too close to the bone. "If I what?" I asked. "If you formalize," she said, and then softly, "if you sign." I cleaned a cup that did not need cleaning and dried it with the hem of my apron because there are times when your hands need to move so your heart won't break something. "I'll think about it," I said. "Thank you," she said, and touched my shoulder in a way that told me she did not think about it at all. After they left, I called Zoe. "Upload worked?" I asked. She whistled. "We got it all. The wing, the director, safer than herself, your sister's pitch, the donor wall, the part about hosting a cocktail hour if you sign. Want me to pull angles from Seabird's own lobby cam too?" "They're going to say it's out of context," I said. "Then let's give them more context," she said. "When's the storm supposed to hit?" "Saturday night," I said. "By Friday, you'll have a panic declaration, evacuation for low-lying, all the usual. They'll try to move you early so the paperwork clears before the shelters open." "Smart girl," I said. "We can be smarter," she said. The next day, the county issued the evacuation maps that everyone ignores until they don't. Port Harridan has 2 looks during hurricane prep: the calm competence of people who have patched roofs in their sleep, and the brittle fuss of people who like to be seen doing things. Evelyn belongs to the second category. She arrived in linen with a tote bag full of flashlights, still in packaging, and a roll of duct tape she held as proof she belonged to the world of people who can fix things with silver. Bryce carried a folder and the certainty that he could make things happen because he has never met a judge who didn't play golf. "We're going to get ahead of this," he said, dropping the folder on my table. "Here's the guardianship petition we filed. Just temporary, just for your own good. And here's the consent for transfer to Seabird for 72 hours while the storm passes." "You filed without telling me," I said. It wasn't a question. Emergencies require action, he said. You'll thank me. I opened the folder. He had included a copy of the neurologist's letter and the DNR and a printout of my bank's auto-pay schedule with the word late circled 3 times in red, though nothing on the page was late. The petition used words like protect and stabilize and risk. Evelyn had signed as concerned sibling. My stomach did that slow turn it does when the ferry hits someone else's wake. If you've already filed, I said, what is this for? I tapped the consent line with my finger. For optics, he said, and it slipped out of his mouth so clean he didn't even flinch. It's better if the court sees that you're reasonable. Optics are what people use when truth won't sit still, I said, and stood. I'm going to take a shower. I shut the bathroom door and leaned my head against the cool tile. Then I turned on the water so they'd hear something besides my heartbeat and opened the little tin box behind the extra towels where Tom once kept fishing licenses and I now keep the small things that matter more than licenses. I took out the tiny ring of keys, the ones that opened the clinic basement, and I took out the USB Zoe gave me with the word cloud burned into it. And I took out the will Tom and I wrote on a cheap legal form and then had notarized at the bank by a teller who cried. I slipped the USB under the elastic in my bra. I put the keys in my pocket. I tucked the will under my shirt against my skin because that is where promises belong. When I walked back into the kitchen, Evelyn was at the stove. She had lit the burner and was boiling water like a person on television who doesn't know how to look useful in a kitchen and decides a kettle will do. The smell reached me before the hiss did. It wasn't the clean blue flame smell that cooks potatoes and soup. It was the wet, metallic stink of gas. The kettle whined low, like an animal waiting at a door. I leaned casually against the counter and looked at the burner. The knob was turned, yes, but the flame wasn't clean. It guttered, flared and coughed, the way it does when someone has fiddled with the pilot. I smiled at my sister like a woman who smells nothing but tea. Careful, I said. You'll make the house smell. She twisted the knob and the flame went out. We can get you induction at Seabird, she said. Safer. I can get myself tea in my own kitchen, I said. That night, when the county reversed lanes on Route 1 for southbound buses, and the anchors came on with their sleeves rolled up to show they meant business, I packed a bag. Not much. 2 pairs of jeans, 2 shirts, socks, underwear, toiletries, the photo of Tom that makes me feel like he just said my name in the other room. I put the bag by the door and slept in my clothes like a firefighter. At 2 a.m, my phone pinged with a county alert. Shelters open 6 a.m., North Lot High School. At 5, I was at my clinic. At 5:05, Zoe crawled out from under the desk like a stowaway and grinned. You tell your mother? I asked. She's on Seabird's night shift, she said. She'll know where I am by smell. Besides, I'm 18 tomorrow. She says I can do one stupidly brave thing before then. She doesn't want to know what it is, and she told me to tell you she'll deny it if anyone asks. I have soup, I said. I have batteries, she said, and an idea. We sat in the basement, where the concrete makes promises it was never asked to keep. The clinic is an old cannery, repurposed badly, and then repurposed better. The basement once held barrels of whatever factories used to store. Now it holds my emergency cots and the extra oxygen concentrator and a pile of blankets that smell like cedar because that's what I keep in the box with them. Zoe spread out her tools like a magician. Your wrist alarm records, she said. Your neighbor's nest caches the lobby when your porch motion trips. I piggybacked on Seabird's donor cam with the public link embedded in their own event page. Don't ask. I'll say it's illegal. You'll say you don't know how to ask about that, and we'll both tell the truth. What do we need? I asked. A confession, she said, disguised as a fundraising pitch. You've been listening to the adults in your life too closely, I said. By noon, the wind had begun the work of making the trees talk, and the ocean had begun thinking about what it might take. I could have gone to the shelter. I could have handed my ID to a volunteer from a different county and found a cot beside an old man who snores and a baby who doesn't. I could have drank weak coffee in a gym while other people tried to stay calm. Instead, I slept for an hour on my clinic cot and woke to a text from Evelyn. Come now, we'll send a car. The message included a photo of a cheese plate no one eats before a storm and the caption, Seabird Family Cocktail Hour, weather permitting. I texted back, I'll drive. People say nerves when they mean fear. People say family when they mean control. The Seabird Point parking lot was half full of cars that don't know how to get dirty. Men in blazers hurried women in good sandals through the revolving door, performing urgency with their faces and leisure with their clothes. The lobby was lit for a party. A trio tuned their instruments in the corner. The director of admissions wore a scarf that looked like it cost more than my car registration. Evelyn stood by a table with a sign that said, Building Your Legacy in Weather and Calm, which might have been funny if you didn't know she meant it. Meg, she said, her voice all relief and triumph. You made it! I did, I said. Isn't that something? Let's get you settled upstairs, she said, taking my elbow. I'd like to hear the music first, I said, my wrist itching, my fingers half a double tap away from the kind of insurance that isn't sold by men like Bryce. Bryce joined us with a glass of white wine he swirled like it had secrets. Judge Weatherby's wife is here, he murmured to Evelyn, and she paled the way a person does when the person in the room she'd hoped for has arrived, wearing a different face. Judges arrive in a town like this in two ways: through elections people don't follow, and through wives who make fundraising chairs feel important. Ladies and gentlemen, the director said, stepping to the microphone, her voice smooth as the marble under our feet. Thank you for coming to Seabird Point this afternoon as we prepare to weather the storm together. We welcome our families, our friends, our donors, and our community partners. Safety is our first priority. She paused for applause at the word safety. The word always earns its claps. And we are proud to be a place where safety and beauty are not at odds. Evelyn touched my elbow. Come upstairs, she mouthed. I smiled and shook my head like a stubborn child, and somewhere a small joy lit. It is a peculiar thing to realize you still know how to disobey your sister. The trio played a waltz no one danced to. The storm bulged at the windows like a body pressed against glass. People laughed a little too loud. People checked their phones for updates that wouldn't come any faster for the checking. Bryce positioned himself beside the donor wall like a man waiting for a good photograph. Zoe slid next to me like she'd always been there. In her hand, a laminated badge that said Event Tech and a font trying too hard to be casual. Your wrist, she whispered and touched her phone. She had tied her hair back with a cable tie. Your wrist, now. I scratched as if absent-minded, double-tapped once, twice. The recorder hummed to life I couldn't hear. My pulse did what pulses do when they think they're in charge. Evelyn guided me toward a little alcove with velvet chairs no one sits in. Just sign the transfer, she said softly, and we'll do the rest. It's just 3 days. For the storm, we can revisit after. After the storm, I said. I'll go home. Meg, she said. And I love my sister's name and hate how it feels in my mouth now. Don't make this hard.
you'd like it easy, I said. You've always liked easy. She stared at me, and something old and ugly flickered across her face. You always think you're better, she said quietly. You think you're the one who stayed, while I had to go make something of myself so they would stop ignoring us. You think Tom makes you special because he died? Heat climbed my neck. I swallowed it back, because rage is not a tool, it's a wrecking ball. I think, I said, that people who love you don't ask you to erase yourself as proof. She leaned closer, a whisper right against my ear, the way girls whisper secrets at sleepovers. It's already done, she said. The court will sign guardianship as soon as the judge checks his email. The policy will pay out within the week, and the house will list as soon as Bryce finds the right language to make your age charming. You're tired. Let me hold it. Let you hold my bones, I said, and the words came out raw. Her smile was soft and terrible. Let me hold your life, she said. Evelyn, what did you do with Marjorie? For a second, she looked like someone had said a forbidden word in church. It was a tiny, beautiful win, and I let myself feel it. Marjorie was our cousin. She died at 19. She liked to sit with me on the stone wall behind the buoy and watch people lie to each other on first dates. She laughed like a gull and kissed boys like she was borrowing sugar. Casual, generous, quick. The summer she died, Evelyn spent August in Arcadia with a family who could afford to forget school existed. When she came back in September, she was carrying a purse that cost more than our rent and a new habit. She called herself Eve. A girl Ev once babysat told me years later that when Ev needed a social security number to open a credit card at 20, she used Marjorie's, just for a minute, because hers had a blemish and she could fix it later. Minutes become years when no one watches the clock. Evelyn recovered quickly. She has always been good at recovery, better than sin. Don't dig up bones, she said. It doesn't suit you. Neither does murder, I said. She laughed, a sound that made the hair rise on my arms. Don't be dramatic, she said for the third time. And if stories were spells, that phrase would be the one that opened the floor. It's done, she repeated. And that was when Bryce approached, smiling like a man who likes the smell of his own cologne. Everything okay here? He asked, in the tone men use right before they add themselves to a conversation no one invited them to. Better than okay, Evelyn said. Meg is ready to sign. I'm listening, I said, to the song. I tilted my head toward the trio. Bryce leaned in, his breath wine and wintergreen. Miss Cole, he said, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. We're trying to protect your interests. Which part of my interests is the part where your wife used our dead cousin's social security number to open a card in 1998? I asked. His smile flickered the way pilot lights do before they decide to be flame. You don't want to do this here, he said. I do, I said, and let my voice carry. Loud enough that Marta looked up from her mop, and the director glanced at the soundboard, and Judge Weatherby's wife paused with her mini quiche halfway to her mouth. I want to do it exactly here. Miss Cole, the director said into the mic to Brait, perhaps you'd like to... I moved toward the mic like someone called my name in church. I felt Zoe's hand brush mine. The lightest touch. The kind that means, I'm here if you need to jump. I took the mic gently from the director, and my voice came out calm, which is the mercy nurses get when it matters. Good afternoon, I said.
My name is Margaret Cole. I live in a cedar-shingled cottage on Backshore Road. I run the Harbor Street Clinic. If you've brought your kid in for stitches or had your blood pressure checked for free or needed someone to tell you the truth when your husband said the doctor was wrong, I am that someone. I came today because my sister wanted me to see what safety looks like when money puts its finger on the scale. She told me I'd be safe here during the storm. She told me the court would sign guardianship over me just for 72 hours. And she told me I should sign my consent here in the lobby where the nice ladies can clap. The nice ladies did not clap. And she told me right in that alcove that it's already done, that the policy will pay out within the week. I lifted my wrist and scratched. I'm a nurse, I said. We chart, we record. On the big screen above the donor wall, the lobby camera flickered once, twice, and then the image snapped into a clean feed that was not the one the director of admissions wanted. It was a split screen. On the left, the alcove where Evelyn had leaned into my ear like a girl at a sleepover. On the right, a crisp overlay of words, recording in progress, Seabird Point Lobby, timestamp. The audio came up, sweet and merciless. There she was, my sister, saying, "It's already done. The court will sign guardianship as soon as the judge checks his email. The policy will pay out within the week." There was Bryce's voice, for optics. There was my voice. Optics are what people use when truth won't sit still.
Someone gasped, and when I turned my head, I saw that it was Judge Weatherby's wife. The director moved toward the soundboard. Zoe stepped in front of it like a girl body blocking a bully. "Public access," she said to the director softly. "Don't touch." She tilted her head toward Marta, who had set her mop handle against the board like a pike. The board obeyed the people who keep floors honest. "Evelyn Ward?" a voice asked to my left, and it was a voice that carries more weight in a small town than money. Detective Pappas, whose daughter I'd taught to tie a sling with a dish towel at a church picnic. "I'm going to ask you and Mr. Tolland to step over here." "We're in the middle of an event," the director said, shaking. "This is inappropriate." "So is fraud," Pappas said, and his voice was as polite as a postcard. Evelyn lifted her chin. It's the move she practices in mirrors, the angle that says she knows how light works and how to bend it. "This is a family misunderstanding," she said, and I heard the word family hit the marble like a dropped coin. "No," I said, "this is a crime." "Don't be dramatic," she said for the last time in my presence as my sister, and I felt the word break off. We were going to be something else after this. I would learn the new name. I had time. Detective Pappas's radio crackled. He said, "Copy," into it quietly. He turned to me. "Miss Cole, do you have copies of the documents you referenced?" I pulled the forged DNR and the neurologist's letter and the guardianship petition from my tote. The director tried to edge the soundboard slider down. Zoe's hand landed on hers. "If we mute this," Zoe whispered, "it will all happen anyway. Let someone hear it who can help." On the big screen, the right side split into a second feed, my porch camera. The image was last night's timestamp, and there were Evelyn and Bryce on my steps, whispering. The audio was thin. Zoe boosted it. It thickened. "Bryce, leave the knob a quarter turn. The pilot will do the rest." Evelyn, "You really think she won't smell it?" Bryce, "By morning, no one will be here. The storm will take the blame." I stood in the sound of my sister planning my disappearance like she was planning a dinner party. "Turn that off," Evelyn said, her voice sharp. "You don't have permission." You gave it, Zoe said calmly, when you posted your event link with an open embed. You shouldn't let children teach your staff how to set passwords. She looked suddenly so young that I wanted to put my arm around her and be her shelter. Also, she added, I don't like when people hurt the people who keep my mother's floors clean. In the corner by the donor wall, a woman started to cry the little silent cry people do when the picture in their head of the world no longer matches the frame. It is always disorienting when you realize which furniture in your life is nailed to the floor and which pieces are props. Bryce did a thing men do when their words fail them. He reached for paper. He pulled a folded sheet from his pocket and flattened it on the table, my signature at the bottom. Miss Cole already signed the consent, he announced, but his voice wavered because even the sunniest lawyers feel weather. We're done here. I looked at the signature. It would have fooled me if I weren't the one who knows my own hand when it is tired and when it is delighted. It would have fooled the judge if the judge's wife had not just watched my sister confess in a lobby full of people she invites to galas. It would have fooled my patience, except that every person over 60 in this town knows what it feels like to be told your pen doesn't belong to you. That's not my name, I said. That's your name, Evelyn snapped. You're acting like a child. No, I said, and I felt something settle in me, like a deck chair wedged just right against rail and wind. I'm acting like a person who's not going to be erased. Everything after that was storm and procedure. 2 uniformed officers escorted Evelyn and Bryce to a small office that smells like air freshener and budgets. Detective Pappas asked me to sit in a quiet room with the door open. Zoe sat beside me, her knee bumping my knee, so I knew I wasn't dreaming. Marta brought us water in paper cups that said, "Thank you for your donation," because the storage closet with the regular cups was behind red velvet rope. The storm hit at 4, like an apology. The windows strobed with lightning and the world outside turned the color of a bruise. The power cut, the generators shouldered the room. People tried to pretend they weren't afraid. Somewhere down the south corridor, the woman in the floral sweater called for her husband and a nurse said, "He'll be back soon." And the lie snagged my heart again. Detective Pappas returned with a pad of notes and a face like someone who would have preferred this to be a different day. "Miss Cole," he said, "I need you to walk me through the last month. Everything you have, everything you remember." So I did what nurses do when someone asks for a story that matters. I told it in sequence with the details intact. The letters, the forged DNR, the neurologist, the stove, the porch camera, the courthouse script, the guardianship petition, the line about optics, the words in my sister's mouth that I had not put there but had heard there before. It's already done. He took it all down. He asked precise questions the way a good cop does, and a good nurse does, and a good pastor does. Tight enough to hold, soft enough to let the truth breathe. He asked for my consent to pull the cloud recordings. I said yes. He asked where I thought I would be safest tonight. I looked at the storm in the windows and at the woman who kept asking about her husband and at Zoe's hand on my sleeve. "Right here," I said, "where people can see me." Evelyn and Bryce did not come back into the lobby. The trio packed their instruments quietly. The director of admissions sat on a velvet chair and stared at her scarf as if it would explain something. The donors shuffled toward the elevators in a line of really good coats. Marta mopped the same square of floor 3 times and then set the mop down and came to me and put her hand on my head like I was a child. She said, "You eat." And when I didn't respond, she said it again the way mothers do when the word is medicine, not suggestion. "You eat."
"I will," I said, and found that I could. I didn't sleep that night. At 2 a.m., the storm was still angry, and at 3 a.m., it was less so. And at 4 a.m., someone began brewing coffee strong enough to make me consider being kind to people I hadn't planned to be kind to. At 5, Detective Pappas returned with state troopers and a woman from Adult Protective Services whose file folder was as thick as the old phone book. Guardianship petition withdrawn. Emergency order issued restraining contact until arraignment. We found financials that make me wish your sister were better at math. The neurologist is cooperating. He looked tired. You want to make a statement? Yes, I said. We sat in the small office that smells like budgets and air freshener. The APS worker asked questions at a speed that felt kind to me. She wanted to know where my medications were, who held my medical power of attorney, what passwords my sister had, which boxes in my house contained things that could burn. I answered like a woman who knows what her body is doing in a room. She asked if I had anyone I trusted to stay with me when the storm was done. I have a whole town, I said. And a girl who can reroute a lobby camera with a piece of gum. Guardianship petition is a powerful tool. In the right hands. I'm sorry you ran into it in the wrong ones. On Monday, the sky was the color of dishwater, and the streets were a tangle of branches and apologies. The power crews did what they always do, arrived like cavalry and made men cry with gratitude. I stood in my kitchen, breathing in the clean smell of the morning the storm leaves behind, and made soup. When I set the spoon on the counter to answer the phone, I thought how ordinary it looked, and how extraordinary it is when we get to keep the ordinary. It was Detective Pappas. Arraignment at 9, he said. Do you want to be there? I don't know, I said. You don't have to be, he said gently, but if you don't come, she'll think you're hiding. I'm tired of being someone else's idea, I said. I'll be there. Bryce pled not guilty and asked for time. He has always asked for time, and he has always gotten it. Evelyn stood in a blue dress that made her look like a painting and did not look at me except once, when she thought I wasn't looking. That small look contained everything I recognized of my sister and everything I didn't. I felt the shape of it press against my ribs like the wrong size of something you wish fit. I did not speak at arraignment. I spoke at the hearing 2 weeks later when the neurologist's license lay on the table like a pen someone wanted to hand back and couldn't. And when the insurance adjuster read the words decedent out loud like he was ordering coffee. I spoke when the judge asked if I had anything to say before the court considered temporary measures for my protection. I am not a measure, I said. I am a person. The men and women who sit in their kitchens and get told they are tired and should let other people sign their names are people. The word safety is not a synonym for control. Memory care is not a phrase you get to use when you want to sell an empty room. If you want to protect me, protect my name. The courtroom went very quiet then. A quiet I wish I could pour into jars for the people who will need it after me. There were investigations. They have their own weather. Storms of paper, floods of emails, search warrants that sound like thunder because of all the official names. What they found was worse and better than what I'd prepared for. Worse because Evelyn and Bryce had done this before, small versions to smaller people with less proof. A great-aunt in Bangor whose temporary guardianship turned into an auction of her quilts while she slept in a hallway. A neighbor with a checkbook Evelyn found on his credenza. Better, because when the prosecutors pulled their thread, the sweater came apart cleanly. They could charge what needed charging. The hardest part wasn't the court or the reporters who wanted me to use words like betrayal for their headlines, or even the day I walked back into my house and found the window seals chalked white and my garden blown sideways. The hardest part was the afternoon my niece Maya knocked on my door, and I opened it to her face, which looked like a picture of all the years I hadn't been allowed to help her. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Always," I said. She sat at my table in the chair Evelyn had occupied for 100 supervisory tea times and put her head in her hands. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." "You didn't do this," I said. "She's my mother," she said. Do you ever feel like you're two people? The one who knows what's right and the one who can't stop loving the person who did something wrong? "Yes," I said. "Every day since I was 10. Maya laughed the laugh of a girl who has been crying so long her body forgot how to do the other thing. "They say she used Aunt Marjorie's number," she said. "Did you know?" "I knew she was the kind of person who would," I said. "I didn't know she did." "I don't want to become her," she said. "I've been looking at my hands a lot, like maybe there's a map." "There isn't," I said. "But there's a compass. It points to the same place every time. Tell the truth, keep the vulnerable safe, don't take what isn't yours, forgive what you can, and what you can't forgive, don't pretend you can." "Is there soup?" she asked, because the women in our family always ask this when the instructions for living threaten to overwhelm. "There's always soup," I said. In October, when the last of the blue tarps came off roofs and the tourists laughed and the kids had committed to their Halloween costumes, the county held a small ceremony at the high school to thank the first responders. They asked me to speak because people like to put nurses on stages when we've done something they can't name. I wore the good sweater Tom bought me the year the clinic kept its doors open by luck and prayers, and a check from a man who sent cash in an envelope with a note that said, "You don't know me. You helped my mother. Keep doing it." I stood at the microphone in a gym that smells like middle school sweat and fresh paint and said what I needed to say so I could stop rehearsing it in my head at night. "If you are the kind of person who is very tired," I said, "and someone tells you they can hold your life for you while you rest, ask to see their hands. If their hands are the hands of a person who has held pain with tenderness, you can rest. If their hands are the hands of a person who moves other people like checkers on a board, keep your keys." Afterward, people hugged me. People brought me fudge and pies like old times. People slipped $5 bills into the donut jar on my counter and told me not to tell their husbands. And the woman from Seabird's Memory Wing, the one with the floral sweater, took my hands and said, "He came. He was late, but he came." Which is not the kind of truth a court can file, but it is the kind that keeps the rest of us upright. Evelyn took a plea in December. Bryce's lawyers tried to make words like stress do heavy lifting they weren't meant to do. The neurologist cried on the stand. The judge said he had considered, and here he paused, with the showmanship men like him can never quite stow, the totality of the circumstances. That phrase always means somebody has arranged facts into a picture that pleases them. This time the picture was correct. Evelyn went to prison. Bryce did not, but he will not be invited to Seabird galas anymore, which, in his world, is like exile with better snacks. In January, I filed a motion to adopt myself. That's what I told Zoe, who laughed so hard she nearly swallowed a bobby pin. What I did really was file a petition to adopt Maya when she asked me if she could come home. My home, not the house where her mother taught her how to be useful to other people's appetites. She is 22. The court clerk smiled at me in a way that contained more love than most people get in a year and said, "You don't have to adopt a grown woman, Miss Cole. You just have to tell her she can stay." I told her, and she did. She moved into the room that used to be Tom's office and now holds books and a sewing machine and a girl who is not a girl anymore. The clinic got 3 new couches in February, donated by a man who said, "You're going to need more places to sit with people." He was right. People came. Older people who had been told they were tired, who had been told they would be safer somewhere that sells safety by the square foot, who had been asked to trade their keys for quiet. They brought their DNRs and their neurologist letters and their daughters-in-law and their brothers and their fear. They used words like guardianship the way you use a foreign phrase you learned from a television show and then forgot to practice. I made tea. I wrote names down in my careful hand. I taught Zoe to recognize the flinch in a person's face that means they will apologize before they say what they need. Spring came like it always does here, stubborn, muddy, racing ahead and then pausing, a child trying to see if you're watching. The forsythia in front of the clinic bloomed like it had a point to make. The harbor shook itself dry and went back to being itself. The Seabrook Point director retired to spend more time with my family, which is what you say when you have learned what the floor has to teach you. The donor wall stayed, of course. The rich like to see their names in glass. I do not begrudge them that. I have learned that everyone needs to see their name in something. Some choose glass. Some choose other people's mouths.
In May, I took the ferry to Vinalhaven with Maya and Zoe and Marta and 3 old women who make trouble with me on Thursdays when we call our walking group a support group, so the grant covers the snacks. We brought our notebooks, not the kind with goals, the kind with names. We wrote down people whose hands we trust. We wrote down passwords we'd forgotten to tell anyone. We wrote down where the wills are. We wrote down the names of the nurses who have taught us to breathe again in rooms where breathing is not guaranteed. We wrote down the name of the girl who can make a camera tell the truth when a lobby would rather not. On the ferry back, the sun made the water look like it was breaking into coins and passing them around. Maya leaned on the rail and said, "Do you ever stop listening for something to break?" "No," I said, "but I've stopped pretending I don't hear it when it starts." She nodded like that was better than being unafraid, which it is. A week ago, I ran into Judge Weatherby's wife in the produce aisle, and she reached for my hand and said, "I'm sorry." I told her she had nothing to be sorry for. She told me she had set a table for 2 that night, the night in the lobby, and put my name on a place card. It felt right, she said. I didn't know why. I did, I said. Thank you. Today, the harbor is loud with engines that sound like men who love weather too much, and women who know how to tie a line so it never breaks in the wrong place. I swept the clinic front step and waved to Reverend Lucy and pressed my palm to the door frame and remembered the night I fell asleep in Tom's flannel shirt after the storm and woke up standing in my kitchen with soup on the stove and my sister's voice removed from the room. You want a moral? People like morals. They make the messes behave. I don't have one that fits on the back of a program. I have something else. A declaration that doesn't need a gavel. If someone tells you they can carry your life for you, ask first to see what they have already dropped. If someone loves you, really loves you, they will not ask you to disappear to make their story easier. If you are tired, rest in a place with honest floors.
If there is a storm, name it. Tie down what you can and go stand by people who will call you by your right name until the wind lets go. My sister signed my death papers while I was still alive, but I was still alive, and that, as it turns out, changes the ending.